Welcome to the Dark Ascent Podcast, where we illuminate the path to discovering your true will. This is episode 18. Welcome to the New Aeon. To learn more about our work, please visit darkascent.org. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Hi everyone, welcome to our podcast. I am your host Melektoth, and I'm here with my wife Elinara.
Hello.
And today we are talking about something that I actually have no idea if it would have fitted in one episode or not. We will see. There's a lot I want to say about it, but who knows? We'll just see how it goes. But what we're talking about is the New Aeon. And what exactly is that? I know some people might know already, people who talk about like New Age or, of Aquarius or something like that. But this is a little bit different. I'll compare and contrast those later. But what is the Aeon? What is the New Aeon? And where does that come from? This is a Thelemite term, and so I'll be explaining all that. But I want to start with talking a little bit more about Thelema, because I feel like, 2 weeks ago, because last week was Money Without Tears. 2 weeks ago, we talked about, your true will, and I talked about our experience of the Gnostic Mass and that kind of thing. But I feel like it was a little bit abrupt, and I don't know how people felt about that. So I wanted to kind of give a bit of an introduction about Thelema. What exactly is Thelema? Obviously I described it a little bit, but today I want to go into a lot more detail, because this whole thing about the New Aeon is 100% based on Thelema. And so if you don't know what that is or why you should care, then you might be tempted just to skip this whole thing and say, I don't know what they're talking about, it doesn't apply to me, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I hope to show that this is something that is perfectly observable in our current reality. How the consciousness, the current of the New Aeon is manifesting itself. And so it's not as much about whether it affects you or not, because it does. It's about how much you participate in that and whether you do so consciously or not. So Thelema is, I've mentioned Aleister Crowley a whole bunch of times. It was kind of, I guess you could call it a religion. I mean, it's not really the philosophy, it's a religion, but it's not really traditionally what you'd think of as a religion, because there aren't like rules or edicts or laws or, morality or something like that.
And there's no proselytizing either.
No conversion. I mean, in fact, the book of the law says no, don't convert, don't argue. But essentially, it's all based on the man Aleister Crowley, and most people have heard of him, some people with very negative connotations, but he was someone that was born in 1875 in a very strict Christian household. And his history is a whole different story, but through his upbringing, he began to be interested in the occult, and various different events brought him to Egypt in the year 1904. And whether you believe it or not, he claimed that starting on April 8th, 1904, lasting for 3 days, he received a transmission for a book that would become the Book of the Law, or technically called Liber Alvel Legis, which is basically the text or the holy book for the New Aeon. So for a long time, I did not believe it. If you read the text, it sounds a little nuts. It's very, Elinara can tell, because this past April, we listened, a friend of ours on Facebook was doing a reading of Liber Al, and
that's the short term.
I'm pretty sure it's obvious. But she was doing a reading of that, and so Elinara listened for the first time. And what were your impressions?
I thought they were speaking in tongues. It was like, it may as well have not been English.
Yeah, it's really complicated.
And when you don't know what the symbolism is, it's like it's Greek or something. You just don't get it.
Yeah.
It's just words that mean nothing at first.
Right, exactly. Like even just the first few verses, I have it pulled up because I refer to it a lot now. Like if you don't know what it's talking about, the first few verses just sounds nuts. So it starts with this: Had, the manifestation of Nuit. The unveiling of the company of heaven. Every man and every woman is a star. Every number is infinite, there is no difference. Help me, O warrior lord of Thebes, in my unveiling before the children of men, and so on and so forth. Those are the first 5 verses. And, okay, one verse is comprehensible, like every man and every woman is a star. I've referred to that. I think I referred to that in one of the podcasts.
Yeah, I think you did too.
But everything else, like, what's Had? Who's Nuit? Who's the warrior lord of Thebes? What's this all about? And that's light in comparison to some of the stuff later on. Okay, so when I was younger, so I was introduced to Thelema almost in the beginning of my spiritual path. I mean, I started out in Wicca, and then I went to kind of general neo-paganism, and then got more into the occult and ceremonial magic. And that led me almost instantly to Aleister Crowley, because he's the big name within the last, century or so. And he started Thelema, so, pretty quickly I got introduced to Thelema. But though I studied it on multiple occasions over the last 20 years, it just never really stuck. And I knew there was something there. And in fact, the book itself, I think somewhere says that you can't help but read it. When you read it, you can't help but be impressed by it.
Right. And it's true, because when I heard it for the first time, I could feel the energy even though I had no idea about anything.
Yeah. Right. So, I could tell there was something there, but at the same time, the logical side was like, this makes no sense. And the skeptical side said, yeah, sure. He heard a voice and he wrote it down, and the normal sort of prophet thing. I don't believe a word of it. I mean, what if he just made the whole thing up? I mean, if you know anything about his life, he was a very interesting character, to say the least. One of his monikers was the wickedest man in the world. And he sort of liked that label. He kind of played into it. He wasn't really, honestly. He really wasn't. But to the Victorian era of the time, he really stretched the bounds of what people thought was okay. But, just knowing who he was, even just a little bit, you think he might have just made this whole thing up. Now, interestingly, as you dig into it, that misconception is dispelled, because I was, in fact, reading one of his later books towards the end of his life, Magic Without Tears. And yes, Money Without Tears, my new podcast, was based on that.
I was just going to say that, but I didn't know if I should.
It was a pun, yes. So, Magic Without Tears, and it was sort of supposed to be a series of letters explaining the basics of how magic works. And anyway, in that book, he says, his whole life has been in dedication to the Book of the Law, and that should be studied utmost above everything else. And he said even the totality of his work is not even comparable to one part of one verse of the Book of the Law. So he had huge respect and admiration for this book. And you can tell, he wrote 2 commentaries on this book throughout his life. One in, I think, 1912 and the other around 1920. And especially in the first one, he would just say, I have no idea what this verse means. Not in those words, but basically, I don't know. This hasn't clarified itself to me yet. I don't know what this means. I'm still stumped on it. And even sometimes in the new commentary, he would say this, I thought I knew what this meant, and I really don't yet. So it wasn't like he sat down and put forth an exposition based on his philosophy or something, and he could explain the whole thing. No, he could explain very little of it at first. And in fact, when he received the Book of the Law over those 3 days, it was from noon to 1 p.m., so 1 hour on 3 different days, consecutive days, in 1904.
April 8th, 9th, and 10th.
Yes, and then he basically put it away in his closet or something and he just kind of ignored it for several years, not for a few months, not for, a few weeks or something, but for a few years. And he said he only came upon it again when he was getting out gear to go skiing, which I think is hilarious.
Wow, I didn't remember that.
Yeah, and he came across it and he's like, oh yeah. He fought it for a long time. So the more you learn about him, so on a surface level, it seems like, yeah, he just probably made it up because he was a trickster. He liked to joke. He liked to, trick people. But when you really look into him, the more you learn about him, the more you see that no, in fact, he did not make it up. And a lot of times it baffled him. A lot of times it frustrated him to no end. And he took it very seriously. Very, 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 very seriously. In fact, I was reading an article earlier that upset me a little bit. I actually didn't finish the article because it really...
You didn't tell me about this.
No, I didn't, because you were out at the time. But this article claimed that, because Crowley at the time was very heavily influenced by Buddhism. And so they're like, oh, well, it's no wonder that a lot of Buddhist ideas would be present in the Book of the Law because he was Buddhist, and so he showed a lot of that, and as if it's just some natural, like he wrote it down himself. But when you really read the book, you see that, and you understand what it means and read some of those commentaries on it, you see that it actually said things that he hated.
Yeah.
And I have one example here. This is from chapter 2, which is from the perspective of Hadit, which again, one of the gods of Thelema. And this is verses 9 through, I think, 11. And so the first verse is, remember all ye that existence is pure joy, that all the sorrows are but shadows, they pass and are done, but there is that which remains. And then in the commentary, Crowley says how he really resisted this verse. So verse 10 says, O prophet, thou hast ill will to learn this writing. And it goes on in verse 11 to say, I see thee hate the hand and the pen, but I am stronger. So it's like this dialogue between, the one narrating the book, which is Hadit, and Crowley, who didn't want to write it, he used the word, he got angry at that verse. Because Buddhism teaches that all is sorrow. And here is this being telling him that existence is all joy. And sorrow is an illusion and passes away. And that totally went against his understanding. And so that's why verses 10 and 11 are sort of like a rebuke. Like, yeah, you're having trouble with this, but I'm stronger than you, so keep on writing. And so you see this inner conflict. And so, when people say, yeah, well, you can see this influence of his in the book. No. Anything like that is just incidental, I think. I really now truly believe that the whole book was truly some sort of channeled text or whatever you want to call it. I really do believe that.
Yeah, and I've understood a lot of channeling just because when you grow up Christian and the Bible is inerrant, that's what you're taught. No.
Yeah, exactly.
Not compared to this book.
Right.
Because you can feel the energy is totally different.
Yeah.
Even if you have no idea.
Yeah. So, I really do believe now, I used to not, but I do believe that it is inspired or channeled. But again, what does that matter? So Crowley believed that this book basically was the beginning of a new Aeon. And that new Aeon was called the Aeon of Horus, which I'll explain all that in a second. There's a lot of Egyptian symbology.
I wonder why.
I really think it's just, it could have been anything, and he used a lot of different deities, Greek, Roman, all sorts of different ones throughout his life. But I think a lot of it is Egypt was one of the oldest civilizations.
Yeah, I wonder because it's like the oldest religion or culture.
Yeah, I think it's one of the oldest organized cultures.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's, Egypt is one of the oldest organized cultures. And so it was just common, especially in the 19th century going to the 20th, that a lot of magical orders and organizations would use Egyptian imagery. I think the Freemasons did as well.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Don't quote me on it, I'm pretty sure. I know that the Golden Dawn did. So it was very common for a lot of magical orders and organizations to use Egyptian imagery for whatever reason. And Crowley continued that. So, again, he just happened to be at the right place at the right time. He didn't plan on, I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to write this book. It was his wife actually sort of, not pressured him, but she sort of served as the catalyst for the whole thing to happen. She received some sort of inspired message when they were in Egypt, and he thought she was nuts at first. But what was it? She received some information about one of the Egyptian gods.
Because he did a ritual or something.
Yeah.
He showed her magic for the first time.
Yeah, to invoke, I think it was the sylphs.
Yeah, you're right.
Air elementals. But she received information about, was it Ra?
I don't remember.
One of the Egyptian gods. I'm sorry, I don't remember either. But anyway, he quizzed her on information that would have been very secret, very, initiatory secrets that she shouldn't have known.
And she didn't know them. She was a simple woman.
Right. She didn't know them, and she just came out with them and told him all these things, and he was convinced. And she said, on April 8th, you should go in, to your study, or where they were in a hotel or whatever. Go into the room and basically see what happens. So he did. And he didn't want to at first. And there's a lot of other stuff based around it, but if I went into all that, we'd be here for 3 hours. So, but again, the Book of the Law was supposed to welcome in a new Aeon. So this idea of Aeon is, the way Crowley saw it, is that there were 3 Aeons. This is the 3rd one. 3 total. 3 total Aeons. I will add to that from the start of civilization. We just really don't know about before civilization started. And some people try to categorize that. And overall, I think we just don't have enough information because, again, we don't have any records. So how could we? But from the time that civilization started, roughly 5,000 or so years ago, there have been about 3 Aeons in total. And again, they use Egyptian imagery. So the first one's called the Aeon of Isis. And I'll enumerate them first, then I'll describe each one. The Aeon of Isis, and then Aeon of Osiris, and then the Aeon of Horus, which is currently what we're in. The Aeon of Isis was characterized by focus on the earth, focus on nature, personification of nature, and different deities and, polytheism, that kind of stuff. And basically the focus was just surviving, just being nourished through the earth. There was more or less optimistic view of the gods. I mean, yes, they got into quarrels and conflicts and things like that, but more or less, the gods gave them what they needed, and life was pretty good.
Wasn't it matriarchal?
It was supposedly matriarchal, but I've heard that this is largely a myth, which is why I didn't say it. It was widely believed at the time, when Crowley wrote this, that it was matriarchal. And while I think women initially at least held an equal stance to men, that started to decline, especially towards the end of that Aeon. But
what I more meant is that female deities were more worshipped, or even the earth is more feminine.
Yeah, definitely.
I didn't mean matriarchal women are equal.
Right. So I think there was definitely more of that. It wasn't as much as I think people thought, but there definitely was more of that.
Yeah.
So, and there were stronger goddesses, very independent ones, Mm-hmm. And so this one, again, is characterized by Isis, who's the goddess of magic, and she's also called the builder of cities, apparently. And I find it interesting, this is the time when cities really started to be built, and cultures and societies and countries and empires. But that's basically what this Aeon was characterized by. So that lasted from approximately the beginning of civilization, say around 3000 or so BCE, to around 500 BCE. And then around that time, around 500 or so, you had the Aeon of Osiris. And so essentially people started focusing more on the sun, on the father. And what ended up happening was that these cultures where they had many, many, many different gods kind of on equal, more or less footing, started to have one supreme god that started to take over. So you had Zeus as the king of the gods, for example. In India, let's say Vishnu started to become the primary god, depending on the sect, of course. Whereas before, they were all sort of equal. And that's where stories about Krishna started to really come in. In, Judaism, originally, if you do the study on it, they were actually very polytheistic. The Elohim is a plural noun, which refers to multiple gods.
That's just interesting.
But then Yahweh, or YHVH, because Yahweh really isn't how it's pronounced, but sort of took precedence as we entered in the Aeon of Osiris, and then, all those other gods are outlawed and they're demons and whatever. So a lot of the Old Testament is written from that perspective. But if you see like the beginning of Genesis, it says, we have made them in our image. Well, who the heck is we? I mean, for having one God, and you can't say like the Trinity because the Jews don't believe in a Trinity.
I was just going to ask about that.
Yeah, no, because they don't believe in that. So why would they say we? So we have made them in our image, and the word there is Elohim. So a lot of Genesis was written from that perspective of multiple gods. So I think that's interesting. But as you go on, there's more and more of God is a jealous God, and you can have no other gods before him, and blah, blah, blah. So that happens as we get into the Aeon of Osiris.
And that's why he would say he was jealous.
Yeah, exactly. Because if there are no other gods, then who are you jealous of?
Yeah, and that's what I was confused about. Like, that makes no sense.
Yeah, it's weird. And then obviously Islam with its, Allah, and
Christianity too.
Yeah, Christianity.
You skipped over Christianity.
I did, sorry. It's totally an accident.
I'm sure.
It was.
Because Christianity did come before Islam.
It did. I figured it was grouped into Judaism, so I don't know, mentally skipped over it. But Christianity, Islam, all that kind of stuff, they all had these supreme gods. Well, only God. You had monotheism. And again, even in the cultures with multiple gods, one god sort of took precedence over the others. Yeah. So you see this shift into one supreme invisible God, and also a more of a focus on the sun. And the sun, especially before we really had science, people developed a lot of myths around the sun.
You mean S-U-N, sun?
Yes.
Okay.
I figured that was obvious. Yes, the sun. People focus on the sun, the star, or solar system. People started to focus on that, and there were a lot of myths developed around the sun. So, to our observation, the sun rises every morning and, is drawn across the sky, maybe by Apollo or by Ra or whoever. And then it sets, and it seems to die or almost die at the end of the day. And then it's reborn in the morning every single day. But more than that, you have the year-long sort of arc of the sun, which is, this is just going by the northern hemisphere, it's the opposite for the southern. But, say in the summer, it's the strongest. You have the longest days. And then it gets weaker and weaker until in December, at the winter solstice, it's the weakest. The days are the shortest. And it seems to die. There are, I don't know the details, but there are 3 days from about the 22nd or so to the 25th of December where it's at its lowest point. So, and then, after that, it seems like it's reborn again because it starts to get higher and higher and the days get longer and longer again. So you have this myth of life and death and rebirth or resurrection.
And it was 3 days, which is fascinating.
3 days, right. So a lot of the gods started to take on, especially these sun gods, these sun-based gods, started to take on these characteristics of the sun, because the sun is everything to people, especially at that time. It's the giver of life, which is one of the names of some of the gods, is it not?
Yeah. Yes.
When the winter comes and the sun gets weaker, your plants die. You have to have enough food for the winter. And then you hope it's going to be reborn and spring will come again and you'll be able to plant again.
Yep.
And so the whole agricultural cycle is based on the sun.
Yep.
And so that takes on prime importance. So it's very upsetting if you think that the sun's going to die and is it going to come back or not? That kind of thing, So these gods take on the qualities of what people saw the sun as. Now, this is all from a geocentric point of view, and that's important for later, because it appeared as though the sun did all these things, that it revolved around the earth, that we are stationary, because we're here, so it looks like that. And so it looked like the sun is here during the day, and then it disappears at night. And It's strongest in the summer and then it's weakest in the winter, and that kind of thing. And so you have gods like Dionysus is one I can think of. Is it Mithra? There are several different cults of, sort of mystery cults or mystery religions around that time. And they all are based on this god who dies and then is resurrected.
I didn't know that about Dionysus.
Yes.
I knew that he was the god of wine.
Yes, but there was a whole mystery religion around him, I believe.
Oh. Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so Jesus was only the latest incarnation of that myth.
That somehow stuck.
Right. So, you have the same thing with Jesus, where you have his life and then he died for 3 days and was resurrected. And this is the myth of the sun. And, and I think I mentioned this before, but there's almost nothing new or original or unique about the myth of Jesus. In fact, I know Crowley wasn't even sure if he actually existed or not. He said it didn't really matter because, there's the myth about him, but he may or may not have existed. If he did exist, almost certainly most of the stories are falsified because his story is so close to so many other stories of these heroes who died and were resurrected and who did these miracles and so on and so forth, that almost nothing about his myth is original. And in fact, the early church fathers knew this because, who was it? Justin Martyr, I think, wrote this whole apologetic about, there are other cultures before this that had similar stories, but that was just because Satan knew that Jesus was coming, and so he imitated him in other cultures. Yeah, sure, your case is a little weak there.
I think Satan would be way too lazy to do that.
Like, why would you want to do that? Why? Oh, yeah, well, I know what's going to happen, so I'll go and imitate this whole thing in other cultures. No. Occam's razor would demand that it's probably just an imitation or a, repetition of older cultures.
Occam's razor?
Occam's razor, sorry, I thought you knew that term. That the simplest explanation with the fewest assumptions is probably the truest.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, there's almost nothing original in Jesus' story. He's just another example of this myth of the sun. And so this is what happens in the Aeon of Osiris. Now, in the Aeon of Osiris, it's all about self-sacrifice, which you see quite a bit in the New Testament. It's all about also conversion, pretty much everything you saw in the last 2,000 years. Right? So the Christians did this, the Muslims did this quite a bit. Conversion, sacrifice, a lot of war, that kind of, the whole pattern of the Aeon of Osiris was basically self-sacrifice, was sin, and all these different ideas. So it was very repressive in those ways because you had to believe the right things. Mm-hmm. And that's just how it was. And there was a focus on death, sort of a fear of, an avoidance of, but also realizing it was inevitable and that we had to somehow prepare for whatever came after. And also this belief in the resurrection, so sort of playing out the same story as the sun. And so this preoccupation with death was one of the main themes, and that played into the religions of the time as well. So those were the first two eons. Now, today, I think we see a few things. We see, number one, that the Aeon of Osiris is obviously weakening.
It's supposed to be over, but...
Well, I read something today that said, even after the Aeon of Osiris started, there were several qualities from the Aeon of Isis that lasted several hundred years into the new Aeon. So it's not like you flick a switch and one ends and the other starts.
Yeah, I know.
It's not, it's not that sudden. They overlap quite a bit. So that's still happening, but you see it weakening. I mean, I don't remember the article I read quite a while ago, but church attendance is down
Oh, yeah.
every year pretty much.
I mean, even I see it where I grew up. I grew up in a pretty small town, but there were, at one point, 3 Catholic churches.
Yeah.
Like, in a very similar area.
Mm-hmm.
One of them closed completely. One of them is on its way to closing.
Yeah.
And it used to be where they were packed, the churches were. And now it's barely full.
Right. So church attendance is down. In the U.S., and that's the only perspective I can really come from, because that's where I'm from, I would say that most people, while they would identify as Christian,
they're not.
Very few of them are like the serious Christians that you would have a few hundred years ago. You know what I mean? Like, where it's their everyday life, where the church is the center of their lives.
The only ones that are like that are probably in the South, in Oklahoma.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say the only ones. I mean, you grew up in New York, and
I know,
your family's like that.
I'm saying that fundamentalists.
Yes, the Bible Belt is predominant, but
yes.
But yeah, I mean, I would say probably, as I'm pulling this statistic out of the air, but it matches my experience. Probably over 90% of Christians, it's just a cultural thing.
Yeah.
You know, we have a family friend who is Catholic, and she, you know, does the whole Lent thing because it's just sort of what you do. You know, does she go to church? No. Does she pray? I doubt it. You know, she's not religious in the least.
She does write thoughts and prayers for blah blah blah.
Yeah, well, again, it's something you say.
Yeah.
Does she actually sit down and say, "Dear God, I pray for blah blah blah"? I can't see it. Knowing her, I would very, very, very much be surprised if she did that. I really don't think so. It's just a cultural thing, and that's how it is. They're cultural Christians, and that's how it is for most people now. Very few people is it's the center of their lives. Yeah. In Islam, you know, yes, there are radicals, yes, there are terrorists, and so on, but I would say that a great number of Muslims are being more moderate. You know, especially those in the U.S. When we had some experience of Islam, and the ones in the U.S. were quite a bit more liberal and moderate than some of the ones in the Middle East, per se. But even there, some of them would just kind of have a live and let live attitude, and that's spreading more and more and more as time goes on. So, you know, these religions from the Aeon of Osiris are weakening because their ideas are outdated, and I mean, they're from a totally different Aeon that no longer applies. So enter Crowley, who either identified with or believed himself to be the beast. He called himself the Beast 666, and going back to like the Book of Revelation. Okay, now, did he believe that this actually was true, or was it just a moniker he liked? I think probably a little bit of both. I mean, he grew up in a very fundamentalist household that believed that we were in the end times, and that, you know, Jesus was basically coming any day, and it was very strict. And after his father died when he was young, he started to rebel against Christianity, and to the point where his mother started calling him the Beast, and it sort of stuck. And, you know, that's the name he took on, or the, you know, sort of motto or the nickname he took on for the rest of his life, because he saw himself as ending the old Aeon. And so he kind of saw, I think, sort of metaphorically, the Book of Revelation as, you know, obviously it was supposed to be a prophecy for the future. Well, he saw that as sort of a prophecy of the ending of the Aeon of Osiris. Now, obviously in the Book of Revelation, you know, the quote-unquote good guys win because John was the one writing it, so of course they did. But Crowley took a lot from that book, where, you know, you had the beast, you had Babylon is also an important symbol in Thelema, and though they were demonized, he realized they were the symbols of the new Aeon. And along with, you know, a lot of people say he didn't really believe in Satan. There are a lot of texts that show he really, really did. He didn't talk about him all the time. Sometimes he did. But, you know, he definitely believed that these symbols were symbols of the new Aeon. So that is where Thelema comes in. And again, that's the background that we have. You know, he believed he was the beast, or that was a fitting role for him, whether or not it was true, in fact. And, you know, he received, again, the book of the law. Now, he wasn't looking to start a new Aeon or something. It just sort of, this is my belief, it just sort of fell into place. And I think his upbringing sort of set the stage for this whole thing to happen. And so when it actually did happen, was he ready to bring in a new Aeon? No, not at the time.
He fought it tooth and nail.
He fought it quite a bit for a few years. So it's just kind of how it happened. But he does use these symbols, like I said, as symbols of the new Aeon. So the Aeon of Horus is an Aeon of individual liberty and freedom and innocence. I would say, I don't want to say lack of morality, but I would say more subjective morality.
Yeah.
And basically, it's symbolized, you know, as by a child. So Horus in this whole symbology is a child, and a lot of times he's called the crowned and conquering child. And so a lot of this is from a more childlike perspective. And so you have the innocence, the sort of, you know, non-restrictive growth and wonder of the world. Wherein Osiris, it's like, this is the way things are. These are the rules passed down. You know, but in Horus, it's sort of like questioning the limits, testing the limits and pushing them. And that's exactly what Crowley did. So it's really characterized by that kind of childlike innocence and wonder and desire to grow and desire for knowledge and desire for freedom and not to be repressed or oppressed in any way. So these are the qualities. And I think you see that growing more and more now, where you see, you know, more and more where people are free to pursue their will. Will is a very important word in Thelema, because Thelema means will, as I've mentioned before. But people are free to pursue their will. People have a lot more economic and social mobility than ever before. You know, in most of the civilized world, you can, no matter where you start out, you can climb to a greater height than where you started. You know, you can maybe start a business or get training and have a better job or whatever. You're not restricted to where you started. So this is the kind of thing we see. And then moral freedom. I mean, like, homosexuality was just passed, you know, in the Supreme Court a few years ago, that it's no longer illegal for a gay couple to get married. So that's a definite sign of this Aeon. And you have so many similar examples where people are just free to be who they are, free to pursue their desires, to pursue their paths without anyone getting in the way, right? And you see how that goes against the old Aeon, because, again, religions wanted to control you and what you did and tell you what was right and wrong and that kind of thing. But to me, the biggest sign of the new Aeon is this, and Crowley literally said this, is the understanding, and this sounds stupid at first, but it's true, and I'll explain it. The understanding that the universe or the solar system is heliocentric, not geocentric.
That started in like 17 something.
Yes.
Or whenever.
But religions, how much did religion... Again, there's a lot of overlap.
Okay.
So I want to say that first. And you saw a lot of overlap between Isis and Osiris. And there's a lot of overlap between Osiris and Horus. But also, how much did religion resist? I mean, heck, Galileo was executed for his finding. And the church didn't officially forgive him till like the 90s, was it?
I have no idea.
Something like that?
I really don't know.
Forgive him as if he did something wrong. Anyway.
Because, oops, he was right.
Yeah, because he dared to go against the authority of the Pope. There were literally bishops who wrote in like the 1600s, I think it was, who said, if the earth were ever shown to not be the center of the universe, then we could no longer believe in the Bible.
Well, apparently.
Yeah, well, that happened. So
It did.
I don't have a source for that. I'm sorry. I didn't prepare for that, but I remember reading that. You can look that up. So, it's, yes, that was realized, but was it actually in our general consciousness? No. Religion resisted it for quite a bit.
That's true. I just grew up knowing it, so.
Oh, yeah, you're way into the New Aeon, so you would.
That's true.
But it's really within the 20th century that we have these huge scientific breakthroughs based on this new understanding, and especially testing our limits. I mean, Newtonian physics, which is, obviously discovered in the old Aeon, still true, but limited. It doesn't get us the full way. And so we have like general relativity and quantum physics and all this kind of stuff. But this understanding of the sun being the center, not the earth, is huge, because the sun represents you.
Wait, didn't the sun revolve around the earth in geocentric?
Yeah, that's what I said. The understanding of the sun being the center instead of the earth being the center.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Is huge, because the sun represents, number one, yes, it represents God, but it also represents your true self, which is God, so it's no different. So what do I mean by this? So to the old Aeon view, the sun dies and is resurrected every year, and even every day.
Because it's the center, right?
No, because the earth was the center. And so from our perspective, the sun rises, sets, and goes away. So when the earth is the center of the universe, the sun revolves around us, and to our perspective, it looks like it dies.
Mm-hmm.
But when you realize that the sun is the center, then you realize that that is just an illusion, that it rises and sets, and then it seems to die, and it seems to grow stronger or grow weaker. That doesn't happen. The sun doesn't change. Mm-hmm. We are the ones that change. And the sun shines eternally. Okay? And I'll get in there before Elinara gets to destroy the metaphor.
I wasn't going to say anything.
Okay. It shines eternally, relatively speaking. It will die out one day, but, many, 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 many times are the length of our lifetime.
So is this last Aeon until the end of time? Or
No, the Aeon is another 2,000 years.
But we don't know what's next after that.
I think it's called the Aeon of Mott, but I don't know what it is characterized by, nor do I doubt we'll know until it gets a lot closer. But this is what the current Aeon is. So this understanding, again, it seems like, okay, yeah, sun is the center of the solar system, so what? Okay, yeah, but before we had this myth of the dying god, and that's why it's Osiris, because Osiris was the same sort of thing. He died. Mm-hmm. He was the dying god. And then he didn't, because he ruled the underworld. But instead of this understanding of the dying god who was resurrected, now you see that never happened. There actually is no death, because the sun shines always, eternally. It doesn't go away at night. It just isn't in our, sight. It doesn't really weaken in the winter. It's just our position, our perspective, our covering it over, so to speak. So there is no actual death. Now, yes, there's physical death, but there's a part that lives on eternally, that never was born and never will die. And that's the part of us that is represented by the sun. And so we see much more that this world is really an illusion that covers over the true shining self that we are. Every man and every woman is a star, as it says. We are this shining star that lights our way, but that we cover over with our illusions. And that when we uncover it, it's there shining as it always has. It never gets any weaker. It never gets any stronger. It always is what it is. It's this sort of non-dual idea. And so there is no death, because that self never dies. It just that that the sense of a lower self, the sense of this temporary mortal self, falls away. But the actual being that we are lives on forever. So this understanding is huge. In fact, Crowley called Thelema a sun cult, because it's literally based on the sun at the core of its understanding. And that's sort of the central idea of this whole Aeon of Horus, is that there is no death. The sun shines on eternally, and then the more we understand that, the less that we are caught up in the suffering of this world. And I don't want to say that in a Buddhist way, as it said, all existence is all joy. But existence can only be all joy when you realize this truth, that who you are is eternal and radiating like a star, like the sun, and that you're just, basically your true self is God, or a part of God.
That is just so cool.
Yeah. So, the myth of the dying God is superseded, which is why it doesn't resonate for people anymore. And now we have this idea of true will. Now, this idea of the true will is because if every man and every woman is a star, then that means everyone deserves the respect of a king. Okay, so you don't sacrifice yourself for another, or you don't put someone else beneath you. Everyone is a star with their own orbit and has the equal right to pursue their true will. No one gets to tell them, you can't do this, you must do that, don't do this, that kind of thing. No one has that right because no one has authority over that person because they are a star.
Right.
In their own right. So everyone deserves the respect of that, it says of a king.
Even if you don't agree with them.
Right, exactly.
And that's my problem.
Because everyone rules their own universe.
Yep.
Okay, everyone is sort of the center of their own solar system in a metaphorical sense. So that's the whole premise behind the Thelema, is that you have no right, as Elinara is now reading in the intro, thou hast no right but to do thy will. So it's not, people hear this, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. And it's not that means you can do anything you want to. It's actually, I don't want to say restrictive, but it's actually a prescription, one could say, that you can do nothing but your will. Well, what does that mean? Isn't anything I do my will? No. Because your true will is what you were made for. It's what you're here to do. It's your true purpose, your true orbit, your true path. We go against that all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Anything that makes you unhappy, anything that maybe satisfies a short-term desire but hurts you in the long run. It's a complicated thing, discovering your true will, but thou hast no right but to do thy will. It's actually a limitation, not an absolute freedom to do whatever you want. Right, so that has to be understood, is that it's not you can do whatever you want, it's you must do only what your will is. Yep. That's your only right. And if you don't do that, then don't go complaining when life goes against you, because it can only work for you when you're doing your true will. So this understanding of will is the understanding of the new Aeon, which is that you have the right to do your will, and that's it. And everyone else equally has the right to do their will, equal to yours. Yes. And that's it. And if everyone is doing their will, that everything will go fine. Like, you won't crash into someone else. You won't conflict with someone else. Because if they're doing their will and you're doing your will, you're two stars in their own orbits. Yep. Right? You're not going to conflict. But if one of you gets in the way of the other, one of you is not doing your true will. Okay, so it's a very simple yet empowering idea, and that is what characterizes the new Aeon. And again, I think this can be seen, we have more and more and more where people don't want to be told what to do. People aren't satisfied with the norm, with just doing what they're told, with just doing, quote unquote, the right thing. What religion has taught them. Yes, there are still plenty who are stuck in old Aeonic thinking, but that is falling away more and more and more. And it seems like the more that parents try to push this old Aeon thinking down their children's throats, the more they rebel eventually.
Oh, yeah.
And then they go totally to the other side, right? And so it's happening. This is the consciousness of the new Aeon, and you're probably already part of that, especially if you're listening to this. I'm almost positive that you're part of that. But how consciously you participate is your choice, and now you are more conscious of what that means. So, what does that mean for you? Number one, it means do your true will. That's it. Figure out what your true will is and do that, So, and as it says, do that and no other shall say nay. No, someone else might say, no, you can't do that, but they have no right to do that. They have no right to tell you can't do what you're doing. Right? No matter what it looks like, no matter if it looks wrong to them, no matter what it is, if you're doing your true will, that's all that matters. But number two, that's the biggest one. Number one is just doing your true will. Finding that out and doing that. Number two is similar, though, and I think is just killing off these old Aeon ideas that might still be sticking around in our lives, where you see self-sacrifice as needed, or where you have the idea of sin or of guilt. In fact, in the Book of the Law, let's see if I can see what it is real quick. It says the word of sin is restriction. That's in actually the verse right before thou hast no right to do thy will.
Oh, that's awesome.
The word of sin is restriction. So the only sin, so to speak, is restriction, is to restrict yourself unduly, or to try to restrict another, especially. That's the only sin. So kill off these old Aeon ideas, because the more you resist that, I think more and more people today are feeling the pressure of the new Aeon, especially those who are kind of holding on tight to the old Aeon ideas, because as, let's say, politically, we are starting to move on. Like I said, homosexuality was just legalized. That's a huge, especially for the very heavily Christian-based United States, for homosexuality to be legalized, I think it was a massive step in the right direction.
Yet you have Alabama, who decided to make abortion illegal.
Right, yeah. Like I said, there's still old Aeon ideas hanging around.
I don't know how that's going to fly.
But I think as we see this happening, you see those who are determined to hold on to the old Aeon getting more and more radical, getting more and more extreme with their views, because they're feeling pressured. They're feeling threatened, rightly so, by these new developments. So when homosexuality was legalized, what was it, that one clerk, and I don't remember which state, that refused to sign off on marriage certificates for gay couples until she was removed or whatever? I don't remember all the details.
Oh, really?
I remember that right when it happened. So you have people becoming more extreme and fighting against these new ideas more and more with greater fervor than ever before, because their very ideas, their very beliefs are being threatened, because not because anyone means to, just because their beliefs are outdated. So that's why I think a lot of this is happening. You see, those who are more conservative, or those who hold more traditional values, getting kind of more pressed from all sides, because their values just don't fit in anymore. And so, heck, even those who claim to be Christian are more and more on the liberal side.
Oh, yeah.
Where, and I mean morally, I'm not talking about economically, none of that's really important, but I'm talking about morally, on the more liberal side, where, they're accepting these newer ideas more and more. So it's, I think, relatively speaking, very few who are still holding on to those quote-unquote traditional values. So, what does any of this matter? It matters because it's all around us. It matters because if you believe it, which I do, and there's no way I can give all the evidence in one podcast for why I believe it or why I think it's true, but I think the world around us is enough proof. And if you study the Book of the Law, it really does open up to you and give its own sort of proofs. But that's not my job to do. So I would suggest checking that out. Look, I know that a lot of people, especially some listeners in my audience, are just concerned about, let's say, the law of attraction, or just getting what they want. And that in itself, by the way, is a very new Aeon idea, because just getting what you want 100 years ago would be like, what? No, you have to be responsible and you have to live the right way. So I applaud those who have the desire to get what they want, but that's not all there is also. You know, there is this deeper mystery, and this is why I'm attracted to magic and to Thelema especially. There is this deeper mystery that points us to and answers why what's happening is happening, how to help it along, and what part we play in that. And so, you know, you can study it or not, but it's here, right? So I believe that this all started, you know, in 1904. I mean, regardless, again, you can, I mean, we have like this Age of Aquarius, which is a little bit different, but it overlaps a lot. It's just a little bit different system. So whether you want to say it's the same thing or not, I think it's similar. It's expressions of the same idea. But people know that things are changing. So if you just want to get your desires and that's it, I would say at least that's what you're trying to do, and you're not just asleep and just doing what you're told to do and whatnot. You're not a slave to the world, and I think that's the most important thing. But I would invite you to add on to that a deeper study of magic, because magic is, number one, it helps you to get what you want. It's, you know, the art and science of causing change and conformity with will. That was the definition Crowley had in magic. But number two, it helps you to discover that true self. And I will tell you that all your desires are in conformity with your true will. And so when you can uncover that shining star within you, then you will know your true will more and more. And so you will know what desires are true and which ones aren't. And obtaining them will be much easier. But also you will be in touch with that joy that is mentioned, that I read earlier, that existence is, and the happiness that you are at your core. So there's so much more that can be uncovered, and I think magic really helps with that. Magic is similar to mysticism. That might be a topic for another day, you know, the difference between magic and mysticism. Because a lot of mystics will say, no, all you need is meditation and the knowledge that all is illusion and so on and so forth. But I think magic is it's similar, but it's a different path in that it's more world focused, which I think appeals to the law of attraction crowd, because you don't want to give up all desires and just go meditate in a cave. I mean, right. So magic has a lot that I think would appeal to those for whom that is their desire, is to get what they want in life, but who might also, I know that's why I got into it, is because I was yearning for something deeper. I was yearning for a deeper mystery beyond the law of attraction and all that kind of stuff.
Well, because there's so much more to the world than just visualize what you want.
Right, exactly.
That's not how it all started.
Right.
It all started with magic.
Yeah. So that is what I would encourage you to do, and I will be talking about this more. And I do want to, you know, one of my primary focuses has always been getting results, but I do plan on focusing more in the future on specific ways you can use magic to open up to your true self, to your true will, and some rituals, opening up to some more rituals recently that have been quite helpful. I mean, how they really help in the long run is yet to be seen, but I think it'd be really interesting to describe some of these rituals. They're nothing creepy or scary or anything. They're pretty, to me, I guess, ordinary. I don't know, Elinara has a little more resistance to some of them.
I'm getting there. I'm working through it.
Yeah, so, but I would like to discuss more about rituals in the near future, but this is just to introduce what it is we're talking about, why we're talking about it, what it's all about. And I'm happy to answer your questions. You know, if you have any questions about all of this, you know, it's impossible for me to answer it all in one podcast. So this will be sort of a continuous topic. But if you do have questions, you can come over to where the show notes are, darkascent.org/DA018, and you can check that out. And of course, if you do want to go deeper, we're still doing the Circle of Darkness, where we will be going much deeper into all these topics. And it's a monthly print newsletter that we do. So you can go to darkascent.org/circle to sign up for that. So I thank you for listening, and I hope this was enjoyable for you and that this clarified some things for you, hopefully. And again, we have changed our schedule as I announced last time, so we're here every 2 weeks now. So we will return in 2 Fridays from today for another episode of the Dark Ascent Podcast, and I invite you to listen back in as we explore more of these topics about magic and about ritual and so on and so forth. So I do hope that you enjoyed it, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Love is the law. Love under will.